Chapter 6 of the Afterlife Confessional, Last Call for Tell-All Bill Edgar, from Grant Carl in the comments section. And this was in my local bottle-o, Edgar, same name. I'll pour that out. Get that lit and get the show on the road. How's everyone doing? This is a farm ale from Garage Project. And we've got Illusion Empernay Marquis Deluxe. Have a sip of the beer first, and then we'll get to lighting. Oh, yeah. A little bit tart, a little bit sour. That's a good farm ale. All right, so. Quite earthy and nutty, which I think is a very good pairing with that beer. Alright, chapter 6. Chapter's called Till Death Do Us Part. When news about an Australian man crashing funerals first went viral, I received many requests for interventions at the end of life. One of them sparked my curiosity partly because of the discreet way I was approached. One afternoon, my phone rang and a man identified himself as a medical doctor. Let me just keep this lit. He was dying, literally, but he also had a secret that was killing him and a confession he needed to make. I agreed to meet him anonymously at a cafe on the Gold Coast. I had a hunch that I knew who this anonymous medic was. Long before I had a hunch that I knew who this anonymous medic was. Long before I became the coffin confessor. Back when I was a PI, I'd been hired by a stripper named Carrie to look into the behaviour of certain Gold Coast doctor who she claimed was drugging her, holding her against her will, and essaying her. The investigation had me frequenting strip clubs, brothels, and one place I knew better than the most, the streets. Oh. I just put the ash side in my mouth. That's the first time I've ever done that. We'll turn the page, shall we? I feel like Tuco of Breaking Bad, where he butts the cigarette out on his tongue. Alright, pick up on this side. I'd given the target on my investigation the nickname Dr. Feelgood after my first night of inquiries, and not because he seemed to be particularly good at his job. I never saw him practicing much actual medicine. He seemed to spend more time in establishments that sold sex and lap dances. However, every young woman that he came into contact with seemed to be in a much better mood after they'd spent time alone with him. Dr. Feelgood lived in a luxurious apartment complex in a prominent Gold Coast suburb. Staking out his pad and gaining access wasn't going to be easy, especially if I had to record his exploits for future evidence. At least, it should have been a challenge. But Dr. Feelgood made it a cinch. He was a creature of habit. Every day the same routine: dinner, a few drinks, a visit to a particular strip club, splash the cash, and take home a young, beautiful girl or two. Girls he must have thought loved and adored him. F an idiot. It wasn't hard to work out what they were getting from the relationship. I doubted Dr. Feelgood was some sort of stud in the bedroom, brightening these jaded working girls' night with romance. But he definitely wasn't a strapping young buck. He was older, overweight, tired, and a bit saggy. He dressed rather well, but a nice outfit only goes so far, particularly if it's left on the floor of a Gold Coast brothel. By the end of my investigation, it was my professional opinion that the thing that made Dr. Feelgood so popular was his liberal use of his right to prescribe drugs. Several sources confirmed drugs, scripts, and young girls being lured by opioids to sex parties. I now knew why the young women I'd seen were happier after meeting Dr. Feelgood. I still can't believe I put that out on my tongue. Oh, I reckon this is probably the best pairing. The cigar complements the farm ale and vice versa. Where was I? While following him around from strip club to cafe to casino, then back to strip club again, I never witnessed him meeting with anybody of suspicion. No drug kingpin or street operator, just the working girls who he seemed to favour. He appeared at home and comfortable moving through the sometimes hectic streets, not a care in the world. However, on one occasion while leaving the club in Surfers Paradise, Dr. Feelgood was approached by two young men who I suspected were looking for an easy target to roll for a buck. Someone who dressed well, wore a watch and gold jewellery. flashed the latest model of mobile phone, but more importantly was old and vulnerable. Mr. Feelgood was what you'd class as an easy target. A horny old man something out of a strip club dripping with gold and cash was exactly the sort of mark I'd looked for back when I was a kid on the street. I'm just gonna fix the ash here without losing my page. Fast forward this if you want. I don't know if that made it better or worse. We'll soon find out together. I was sure that Dr. Feelgood was about to get mugged, but then two heavily built doormen came down from the club and escorted him to a waiting limousine. They opened the door for him and shook his hand, allowing for a transfer of a small item. I snapped all of this with my long lens camera, but couldn't see whether he was handing over drugs or just a cash tip to the doorman for their kindness. It was clear that Dr. Feelgood had minders. These strip club bouncers lived in the grey area between regular sleaze and organised crime, and if they were allied with the doc, he was more than just your average patron getting his rocks off. One of the first things I do when I engage I'm engaged to investigate anything related to a crime, be it money laundering, drugs, or domestic, is contact the local detectives and let them know what I'm up to. I do this regardless of them giving an F or not. That way I make sure it's on the record. If the shit hits the fan, none of it lands on me. The ash was splitting, so rolled it off just to avoid drama. I knew this was a criminal matter, but I had everything I needed for my investigation. After a few weeks of following Dr. Feelgood, I received a call from an investigative, struggling with my words tonight, guys, journalist mate, asking what I was working on. When I told him about the doc and his exploits, his ears pricked up. Do you think there's a story in it? It's a doctor on the Gold Coast buying sex, snorting cocaine and selling scripts. I said, yeah, I think there's a story in it. But I asked him not to do anything rash until I had a few days to compile my report and send it to the police. He agreed. After handing my investigation over to the detectives, my job was done. Now it was their investigation. I'd done all I could, and it was up to the cops to do with it what they may. From there, it went to the medical board, but that wasn't my concern. That's the best thing about being a private investigator. You follow people, observe them, get to know them, write a report, take a few pics, or record an event, then hand over the material. You walk away, and you don't give a F about the outcome. It's like being a wildlife scientist of the urban jungle. I do my job, and then I F off without disturbing the delicate balance of scumbags making their way into the ecosystem. Random segue. How about LeBron going to the Sixers? I think it was a smart move. 2 years left in the league, and he's gone to the place that's probably given him the best opportunity to win a flag with the starting five, as long as Embiid can stay healthy. So I hadn't given the matter much thought for years, but when I got a call from a Gold Coast doctor with a guilty conscience, I assumed I was about to be reunited with my old mate, Dr. Feelgood. It turned out I was wrong. The man waiting for me in the cafe was a total stranger. Like Dr. Feelgood, he was also of an advanced age. But the similarities ended. He dressed well, but in muted professional clothes, not the flashy kit of a Gold Coast gangster associate. A doctor, yes, but a good doctor. Well respected in his field, hard-working and compassionate. But he had a secret that was weighing heavily on him, and he wanted to confess. It's a secret that most doctors have, but while it's an open secret for us in the field, it's rarely discussed. Can I trust you? Anything you tell me stays with me unless it's a confession to a crime of a serious nature, I explained. If you've harmed somebody and are at risk of harming someone else, I'm obliged to tell authorities. For example, if you tell me you've committed a murder, I'd have to call the cops right now. What he confessed was not a crime like murder, but it was borderline to say the least. The good doctor said he'd been administering lethal doses of morphine to patients in end-of-life care, the sick and elderly who were already knocking on death's door, or those he knew without a shadow of a doubt were not going to pull through. He did this as a last resort to spare the terminally ill the worst of their suffering before the inevitable happened. He also told me that when he was a young practitioner in his home country, where resources were scarce and life was cheap, he was introduced to a practice not for care or compassion reasons, but to free up space within the healthcare system. To be honest, I wasn't quite sure if the good doctor was a saint or a sinner. I couldn't help it being blunt. Okay, but why am I here, Doc? I feel like this is one of the for the confessional booth. I can't offer you a support or resolution for what you've done. Here we are getting to the nitty gritty. I love these. I love this book. I love the way Bill writes it. And I love the whole concept of everything. It's fascinating. If you want to read more or read the whole book, find it online and buy it. My bluntness worked. He wanted me to deliver an afterlife gift to a man named Mitch. It turned out the doctor had given Mitch's wife, Beth, a lethal dose of morphine in order to end her suffering. Before Beth died, she asked that her one remaining precious possession, a gold necklace, be given to her husband after she was gone. For some reason, years later, the memory of Beth still haunted the doctor. He didn't tell me exactly what it was about her death that had shaken him to the core, but she was the last person he ever euthanized. He was still losing sleep over it and was looking for some sort of resolution. Truth be told, I think his own morality had spurred him on to finally calling me. After he administered the morphine that killed Beth, he'd taken the necklace from her body so that it wouldn't be lost, as sometimes happens en route on to the morgue. People who commit some of the most heinous crimes often keep mementos. A lock of hair, some clothing, a piece of jewelry, so this was a red flag for me. But the doctor had a reasonable explanation. He insisted that he had never taken anything from his deceased patients except for this one time. He intended to return the necklace to Mitch after Beth died, but he'd never found the courage to do so. That's what he needed me for, to deliver a gift to Mitch from Beth in the afterlife. Wow. I should probably do a retro hail. Flavour profile of cigars, pretty much the same all the way through. Barnyardy, nutty, earthiness. White pepper on the retro hail. With a little bit of spice. All right. Here we go. Tracking down Mitch wasn't hard, as the doctor had me given his address and personal details. With the gold necklace in hand, I began my journey. It was late in the evening by the time I arrived at the home that Mitch had shared with his late wife. The front door was wide open, and from there I could see through to the kitchen. There was a young lady, where a young lady was preparing a meal. She was wearing nothing but a long white t-shirt that barely covered her ass. Before I could get her attention, a man who I assumed was Mitch came to the door in an angry and confronting tone, asked who I was and what I wanted. This is a usual response when I do a face-to-face. Responding with an even angrier and more confronting reply normally short-circuits the mouthy blokes and sees me hold the upper hand. I'm the effing coffin confessor, I barked in the bloke's face, and I've got a gift from Beth. Oh my God. I'm just picturing that scenario. So Mitch's door's wide open, he's seen Bill, and obviously, you know, trying to be maybe stoic and maybe feeling threatened that some random person was on his doorstep. And Bill just goes, bah, whack. I'm the coffin confessor. And I've got a gift from Beth. Mitch simmered down quickly, and I explained who I was and why I was standing at the front door. I'd expected the initial aggro, but I also expected some emotions once he understood why I was there. Sadness or gratitude or even more anger. Something, anything, but he just appeared distracted and bored. He didn't seem to care about his dead wife's final gift. He seemed more interested in getting back to the young, scantily dressed brunette, now sitting on his dining room table, legs stretched out provocatively, drinking white wine. I understood then that the necklace, and by extension his wife's memory, meant F all to Mitch. Naughty Mitch. Imagine him taking it and giving it to the young lady lounging in the dead woman's house. I thought then about just telling him some bullshit story and not handing over Beth's necklace. But I'm engaged to do a job, no matter how confronting and unethical it may be. So I gave Mitch Beth's gold necklace and left without saying anything more. I had a bad taste in my mouth, but it is what it is. It's not my job to judge Mitch for seemingly moving on so fast. At the end of the day, even if he never thinks about Beth, then at least she lives on in thoughts and maybe nightmares of the good doctor. Alright, where was I up to? The one man who actually gave enough of a shit to provide peace and closure to the dying woman. After my meeting with the good doctor, I took it upon myself to investigate and explore what he had done in more detail. The more I did, the more it became apparent that the practice was widely known and not discussed. Doctors even have a name for it, acting as the angel of death, otherwise known as assisted voluntary euthanasia. In most states in Australia, up until the end of 2023, assisting with euthanasia has been illegal until very recently. Law stated that if somebody is at the end of life or is in a vegetative state with no hope of recovery, then actively ending their life is an act of mercy, meant breaking the law. The best practice is end-of-life care was to pump a patient full of opiates and dissociative drugs and wait for them to starve to death or die of dehydration. It's effing barbaric. A traumatic way to die for both the deceased and their loved ones who had to watch. I get occasional requests from sick people who are suffering to help them end their life on earth. It's heartbreaking, but I have to tell them I can't, even though I think it's the moral thing to do. Could I? Absolutely, in a heartbeat. Would I? Probably not. I wouldn't tell anyone if I did, but still the requests keep coming, sometimes in the strangest places. I suppose it raises a good point. So I'm just fixing that ash. You know, what would you like to have happen in that situation? You know, you're knocking on death's door and there's no chance of recovery and you're in a lot of pain and you're just watching sort of the world go by in like a disassociated state. You know, like, would you want to be spared that and have your family spared that? Comment what you would do or what you think. I'll be reading more of this book on Instagram Live, but the live will happen before I upload this, so you'll probably miss it, but it will be saved on my profile. Alright, where was I? It was a cool and blustery Tuesday morning on the Gold Coast Broadwater. I'd ventured out for a walk, first thing to start the day on the right foot. This is something I've been doing for many years. 40 minutes. 40 minutes one way and then back. But this morning walk was different. When I got back to the car park, I saw two elderly people embracing. They were staring not at the spectacular water views, but into each other's eyes, with an intensity that suggested they could not stand to look away from each other for long, let alone be separated. I smiled and felt I was witnessing the sort of love my wife, Lara, and I have for each other. As I walked past the couple, the lady returned my smile. "Good morning," said the gentleman. "Good morning," I replied, and kept walking. As I got to my car, the lady piped up, "Excuse me, do you mind if I ask what your number plate means?" She was referring to the Confessor custom plates. "That's my job title," I told her. "I'm the coffin confessor." This brought a puzzled look on her face, but the gentleman must have recognised the name and turned to his wife excitedly. "This is the guy I was telling you about. He went on to explain that he had seen me on TV. Hold on, I just got to clear my throat pretty big and I don't want to do it on camera. All right, the phlegm has been cleared. I was taken back for a moment, trying to think which TV show it was. At that point, I'd done so many that I'd lost track. I'm Antonio, and this is my wife, Jules. The man then said, "If you're not in a hurry, could you please tell my wife about what you do?" I wasn't in a rush, and I was happy to explain. The couple listened, paying close attention without interrupting me. But as I spoke, they shared a sly smile. I felt compelled to ask what was on their mind. This is a long chapter. Jules explained that she and Antonio had been together for over 60 years, but now in old age, they'd feared being separated if they were forced into aged care. It's a big thing. My mum's mum was high care with Pick's disease, which is another form of Alzheimer's, and she got put there. My pa was low care or no care, and he sold the house that he built that I have fond memories of to get a unit closer to the nursing home, and he'd walk there every day to see her. Yeah. I miss your pa and Nana. Doug and Betty. They had a toxic relationship with their only son. His priority seemed to be getting his hands on their home and assets, even if it meant having them consigned to aged care against their explicit wishes. Well, that was one thing that my Nana and Pa swore on each other, that neither of them were going to allow the other one go into care. And then it was the right thing to do. But yeah, they were adamant that that wasn't going to happen. The fear of going into nursing homes to benefit an ungrateful next of kin wasn't new to me, nor was it uncommon. I'd spoken with a lot of people over the year about the predators waiting like funnel web spiders in the family for their moment to bite. But Antonio and Jules's idea for solution was something else. They decided to make a radical decision so they'd never be apart again. Still, with a mischievous look on their faces, they shared what they wanted to do and asked if I could help. I admit, for once in my life, I was speechless. Jules asked if we could meet the following week to discuss things in more detail. She gave me Antonio's mobile number and their address, and I agreed to meet them on Friday morning, 10 a.m. Antonio asked me to keep their conversation under wraps, as he feared if word got out, they would be dragged into aged care or worse, sectioned for mental health reasons, medicated and separated. I gave them my word that nothing they said would be repeated. Getting to the juicy bit. That week flew by, in fairness. Most weeks flew by now that I'm over 50. Time just seems to go faster and faster every day. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because there are fewer miles left on the road and the landscape goes by quicker. Maybe Father Time is just a hoon and a rev head that puts his foot on the gas as you get past city limits. But before I knew it, it was Friday morning and I was pulling into the driveway of Antonio and Jules's residence. A small house perched on a very large block of land with beautiful gardens and flower beds that would have any proud gardener green with envy. I was walking towards the front door when I heard Jules yell out, Nearly did it again. We're around the back, come on through. So I made my way through the gardens to the backyard, but that boasted the most beautiful manicured lawn I'd ever seen. My pride and joy, Antonio nodded when he saw me admiring the lawn. This is where we want the magic to happen. Please, Jules said, gesturing towards a small, tasteful outdoor furniture setup which was laid out with a pot of tea and biscuits. Make yourself at home. After a sip of tea and a Tim Tam, Antonio explained in more detail what they had wanted from me. Elaborating on their plan, they confided in me a week earlier. In short, he and Jules wanted to end their lives on their own terms. They devised a meticulous plan on how they would do it painlessly, in each other's arms. When they'd first told me about back at the Gold Coast Broadwater, I worried that I was hearing a confession of intent of murder-suicide. Now, as they walked me through their plan, I understood that this wasn't some salacious true crime story. It was a true love story. Antonio said he didn't need my help with them taking their own lives. That was a great relief, as the thought had crossed my mind several times since we first met. He asked instead that I carry out a few of their wishes once I became aware of their deaths. I didn't have a problem with this. That's my job. In this case, it would be my honor. Well, that was a very nice beer from Garage Project. Put that out of the way. Move that over. I really don't like the way this is splitting on me. That'll do for now. Okay, where were we up to? The couple wanted their ashes collected at their cremation and secretly spread among their flower beds. Antonio wanted some thrown over his beautifully manicured lawn as well, so that he could continue tending to it and helping it grow after his passing. After these tasks were done, and it was too late to intervene, I was to approach their son and deliver a letter they'd co-written that would explain why they'd done what they'd done and ask for his understanding. Their will was already in place that dictated how their assets and belongings would be distributed. Antonio and Jules wanted me to keep an eye on the legal proceedings and make sure their will was actioned uncontested. While I sat and listened, I interjected several times, asked if they needed help or counselling. I even tried to offer them an alternative to their fear of having their autonomy taken away. But I soon gave up. I could see it was pointless by the look in their eyes. They knew exactly what they wanted to do and what they were intending to do. Truthfully, I couldn't argue with their logic. They told me some horrible stories of abuse within the aged care system over the past 10 years. They'd lost a number of friends who'd suffered and died miserably after being dragged against their will into nursing homes. A good friend was forced to wear a nappy. She was not incontinent, but due to staff shortages, it was easy for them to let her defecate on herself, then help her use the toilet. Imagine you've lived a whole life and that's your end of life care, where because of staff shortages, we'll just chuck you in a nappy, you'll be right. That's mental. From sitting in her own filth for hours at a time, she succumbed to sores that became infected and ultimately hastened an excruciating death. Another friend was refused visitors because he'd become outspoken and would beg to be released from imprisonment. The staff, wary of causing a scene, responding by keeping the man isolated and heavily medicated. He too died a painful and lonely death, but he was luckier than a third friend who was forced to eat food that he wasn't accustomed to, found culturally inappropriate and impossible to swallow. No alternative was provided, and he was left unattended and unmedicated for days. I'm not easy to horrify, but I was deeply disturbed by the stories I heard. While I listened, I found myself recalling long-forgotten memories of my own grandmother being placed into aged care facility, begging to be taken out so she could end her life on her own terms. So I agreed on the spot to help Antonio and Jules. I also agreed to act for them in the capacity of the coffin confessor, to make things as easy as possible and to explain their choice to die with dignity to the world. In addition to my standard contract, they provided me with correspondence stating the following: we now find ourselves at the road neither of us want to cross. Should we be taken to a home, separated and medicated, we know our end will be excruciatingly painful, and this is the reason for contacting you. Over the past 10 years, we have seen firsthand the treatment and demise of close friends who were forced into aged care system, which brings us to why we have chosen to speak with you about our plans to end life as we know it. We are not seeking your assistance, nor is this a cry for help. We have a plan in place, and we will execute that plan at the time we see fit. This is a really extreme chapter, long chapter, so I might read a little bit more, and then if you want to read the full story, you can. I'll just choose where I'm going to end it. The letter finished with official notification that they wanted to engage my services to complete a number of tasks once I'd been notified of their death. I left more than happy to take on this responsibility. This was the kind of job only the coffin confessor could do, and I would do it pro bono. This one was on me. In the days following the meeting with Jules and Antonio, I decided it was time to investigate the aged care system and to see firsthand what they were talking about. In the past as a PI, I was skilled at getting into institutions and gathering information. A lot of PI work in the corporate espionage. The boss is hiring someone to infiltrate the rank and file staff for the company, gain their trust and find out who's got their hand in the till or is otherwise acting against the interest of the company. I don't know why, but people have the tendency to spill their guts to me. People have always gravitated towards me to talk about whatever is on their mind. It must be that I'm a good listener, as I'll sit silently, waiting patiently for hours at a time. I have a resting facial expression that people read as attentive listening. They think I'm hanging on their every word, when in fact I usually have 100 different things running through my head. It's called observation. Which I tend to do a lot more in life as I'm getting older. You don't need to say stuff, you don't need to do stuff. Sometimes you just sit, wait, observe, and then act accordingly when you see fit for your own, not your own gain, but your own scenario and situations. So, if you're seeing someone having certain patterns within a friendship or this or that, and then how you used to behave would be to respond abruptly, or if you feel you couldn't, you'd bite your tongue and you'd let people overstep your boundaries, etc. If you quietly observe, people normally tell you who they are, and they normally tell you who they are pretty quickly if you allow them to. So, where are we up to? Even if I'm tuned out, I'm able to recall a conversation word for word later on. It's something that pisses Lara off. Oh, I bet. I'll tune out while she's talking to me, then when she accuses me of not listening, I recite the conversation in its entirety, verbatim. Which must be a frustrating thing for your spouse to do when you're trying to have a perfectly healthy argument. So, in a short time, I befriended a number of nurses and spoke with several cleaning staff at various aged care facilities. They confirmed the allegations made by Antonio and Jules, and together their testimonials painted a grim picture. They all said more or less the same thing. They were understaffed, mismanaged, and no one could listen to them, not even the authorities or regulators. I witnessed residents sitting alone in front of televisions that weren't even switched on. Some were left abandoned in wheelchairs halfway down hallways and forgotten about. To an individual, every single resident I spoke to confided that they were scared of what would happen to them and asked if I could contact their relatives to get them out of there. I was appalled. At the same time, I realised it wasn't the general staff who were to blame. I saw cleaners and carers making meals and giving out food from their own pantries, trying to make life a little better for the residents. Some of the food being served with the resources the home provided was worse than what they used to feed me in Bogo Road, which I do believe is the jail that he was in. Then it hit me. These elderly residents weren't in aged care, they were incarcerated. Not even a Royal Commission could expose and fix the numerous issues that aged care system was creaking under, especially when people are discarding their elderly relatives to a system they have no care or concern about. It's nothing short of abuse or systematic society-wide scale. But we were doing our elderly, what we are doing to our elderly today will be the calmer tomorrow. The abuse is being hoisted onto helpless and elderly by a combination of greedy, corrupt corporate aged care companies and children of next of kin who look at their frail parents and see only dollar signs. I'll leave it there, but I'll keep smoking. I've got 10 minutes until we hit an hour. I'll just put that on the seat there. It's very true. Like, I worked in residential care, so it's basically institution for kids that would otherwise have nowhere else to go because of their own trauma, their own situation, etc., etc. And the amount of stuff that would happen higher up used to grind my gears. Something chronic. I've just butchered that label. So you'd have the powers to be that employ this person that was trying to to help the kids eat more healthy, which was more to do with, on their terms, to do with for behavioural reasons. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're feeding young people the wrong things and they're eating an unhealthy lifestyle and diet, etc., on the excessive scales, well, of course, that's going to have ramifications on behaviours. But there was a time where we couldn't even send a child to school with a Vegemite sandwich. We had to cut up these chickens, cook chickens and make them chicken sandwiches. Now, you got a kid that likes a particular thing, jam on a sandwich or ham and cheese or Vegemite or whatever. And I grew up having Vegemite sandwiches. It was cheap. I came from not a well-off family, etc. And, you know, that was something that I had frequently at my lunchtime. So you've got these kids that are going to school, whereas a lot of kids in that same setup aren't going to school, where they might be content with having a Vegemite sandwich. Then you're telling them, which is us, not caseworkers or hire to be, like us workers on the ground floor, were having to facilitate this nonsense. So to the clients, we became public enemy number one. So what do you mean we can't have a Vegemite sandwich? You know, you try to tell that to a 10-year-old or 12-year-old that's got extreme behavioural issues, whether it be, you know, psychological or anything else, and you're seen as the devil. But the layers on top of that is, so we would adhere to that, which was whatever, like, you know, we'll do that. But then you'd have case managers. This is where the whole institutionalized thing. It's too many chiefs, not enough Indians. So you normally have case managers that would take these clients to visitation or supervised access. Now, on the way there, these case managers would buy them McDonald's. Now, I don't have anything against fast food or any particular fast food chain. It has its place. But we're being told we can't give them a Vegemite sandwich for school. Then on top of that, we were told to make certain dinners, certain breakfasts. So anyway, they'd go to have these visitations. So you have a case manager that would buy them these, takeaway meals. They'd get to visitation, they'd probably have an hour or 2 hours with, someone that maybe they weren't deemed to be fit to spend, their childhood with, where they would then get taken out by that person and they'd probably have another takeaway meal. And then they were coming back to us and not eating dinner. And so the hierarchy that would happen within that. So we're public enemy number one because they're not allowed to have Vegemite sandwiches. All right, but then these people that are above us as workers on the pay grade scale and, title, case manager, they would be seen as amazing. Why are these workers not allowing us to have these Vegemite sandwiches, but these other cool people are allowing us to have McDonald's? And then we'd have to report in the case notes why they weren't eating dinner. And how do you write that without getting in trouble as a worker? Like, you can't. If I had have said, because of this blah, 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 I probably would have lost my job thousands of times. But anyway, I digress. I'm enjoying this cigar. This was a nice beer. Thanks for the yarn, or listening to me yarning on. Thanks for Grant Carl for suggesting chapter 6. It was definitely a good one, mate. Definitely a good one. That beer was 8.2%, 2.4 standard drinks. Definitely didn't taste like it. Oak barrel aged farmhouse ale, laced with Sauvignon Blanc derived phantasm and fermented with a unique blend of wild workshop and sapwood cellars. Own house cultures, brilliant gold farmhouse ale with otherworldly notes of bright citrus, gooseberry and white grape. If I was reviewing that as a standalone review, that's exactly what I would have said it was. Now to pick a chapter for Instagram whilst I light the fire. I'll just call it there. That's not the toilet going, that's just the washing machine with my clothes in it that I'll need to put in the dryer soon. So that's it from me, guys. See ya.